PR must evolve for Google's new search era. My name is Andy Blason, co-founder of JBH, and joining me here today are Jane Hunt, CEO of JBH, and Andy Hollander, Director of SEO here at JBH too. We do have a small adjustment to today's schedule. Unfortunately, due to illness, Rebecca will not be joining us today, but we have Jane stepping in to answer all the questions today, so no pressure, Jane, at all.
Thanks.
Over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore Google's AI overview and generative search and why the old playbook no longer applies. You won't need any slides or visuals, diving straight into the strategies you need to stay visible and trusted. So by the end of this session, you should be closer to understanding why branded mentions matter more than ever for AI visibility, how to craft PR content that feeds Google's generative answers, what Generative Engine Optimization, or GEO, really means and how to implement it, and how to measure your brand's impact in a zero-click AI-driven landscape. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the questions tab just above the chat window, and we'll have some time at the end to hopefully answer as many of these as possible. So that's all the intros done. Let's get right into it. Andy, welcome. Good morning. So my first question to you, and probably the question on everybody's lips, is what exactly is Generative Engine Optimization, or GEO?
Hi, Andy. Yeah, great question. So GEO, Generative Engine Optimization, is optimizing websites and web assets for increased visibility in large language models. And that's key because large language models don't have rankings. They are return generative responses to user queries, or more appropriate, something called conversational information seeking. So that's what happens. So people enter terms and queries and prompts into large language models such as ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude, and many others that are emerging. And then a response emerges from that generative engine. And GEO is maximizing the likelihood that your brand or client brand is visible in those responses that matter to your brand and business.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think that summarizes it quite nicely. We'll try to learn a little bit more as we go along. So, I mean, how do you do it? How do we start? How do you do it?
Okay, that's a really interesting and quite deep answer. So there's a lot of backlash at the moment going on around the SEO community. I understand why. So SEOs are very protective about their industry, and it's currently undergoing massive turbulence. We have Google, which has been the dominant search engine for probably the last 25 years, has suddenly now gone into emergency mode. In fact, what they call a code red, which they had in their presentation once ChatGPT and OpenAI was released. So what ended up happening was Google went into emergency situation when OpenAI and ChatGPT came out. They then had to take action, and the action they did was to launch Gemini, to launch AI overviews, and now in the United States they've launched something that they call AI mode. You also have the other LLMs, ChatGPT and Perplexity and so on, and all use slightly different models of performance, and use slightly different algorithms and approaches that are actually based on huge mathematical concepts around natural language processing. So the how you do it is slightly different for every single generative engine, because, for example, ChatGPT we know uses Bing because it's invested by Microsoft. We also know that Gemini, AI mode, AI overviews, they use Google. So there's a lot of differences there. But an answer to the exact how you do it, it is your on-page and off-page signals. Now, that's a really oversimplification about things, because in actual fact is you're talking about something called information entropy, or entropy. I never know how to say that, but information entropy basically talks about reducing signal noise and reducing ambiguity between two sets of variables. Now, variable one is the prompt or the query that users are putting into those LLMs. Variable two is the answer. So our job is to try and increase the likelihood that the variable, being your business, is inserted into that answer that the query is asking for. Now that is complicated how to do it. And the general part of this is using something called mutual information. And that's what fuels NLP, or natural language processing. This mutual information helps to reduce signal noise and increase the large language model certainty that your business or brand is the right answer for that query. So what you need to do is provide hyper specific examples, become a brand that is cited in relation to the queries that people are adding into the user interfaces in these platforms. And then if you increase that certainty, that likelihood that you'll be in that answer, you are reducing the ambiguity. So it's all about mutual information. Now, mutual information comes in a wide variety of sources. It comes in the form of digital PR, which Jane's going to talk about. It comes in from citations, from natural citations that you obtain as a result of your brand marketing. And it comes through optimization of on-page text and the creation of on-page text as well, that greatly matches that. And also something that people don't really talk about much is the attributes that businesses have in their positioning. Your positioning as a brand is entirely key now to finding consumers. Now, this matters because of conversion data, because we know that if you look at SEMrush data, they've done a big report recently that a visitor from a large language model is 4.5 times more valuable in a conversion aspect than a traditional search visitor. And I'm speaking to people all the time who are telling me that their traffic from large language models is like 1% of their overall traffic, yet can produce over 20% of the business's conversions on a monthly basis. And the reason why that is because of the hyper specificity. I can't even say that word. So because the answers are hyper specific. And to give you an analogy, Andy, so I was looking for my daughter the other day for boxing gloves she wants for Christmas. So I'm already starting this sort of study, really. So what I did, I went into ChatGPT and gave it a very big prompt. And the prompt was because I wanted to gain the best results. And it took me a few seconds to say it. On the prompt, it had things like I needed Velcro gloves, they need to be pink, they need to be 14 ounce, sparring, good quality, and so forth. And it produced me 7 out of those 8 results were bang on the mark. I could have purchased any single one of them, and it gave me just 7 to go and look at. When I did a similar sort of search, because you can't do these long searches in trad search engines, and I call that trad search engine, traditional search engine. I think that's going to be the thing, trad search. So I think when it comes to trad search, you still use keywords, and then it brings back a tiled section full of e-commerce examples and paid ads. It gives back list posts. It brings back some also ask. It brings back AI answers. It brings back a very messy search engine result. Whereas what I'm getting with the LLM is exactly what I want. So I think there's the key here of GEO and why it's so impressive is because of it's that specific nature, that hyper specific response that it can give. And that's part of your brand positioning as well. So what we're seeing is that SEO is moving greater towards brand marketing principles. And you can't be everything to everybody in brand marketing. You have to be very specific for what your product does. But also you can optimize for that specific nature and also for your users. So it puts the realm back into the content on page, and it puts this round back into publicity as being a huge lever for general engine optimization.
Brilliant answer. I mean, we know what this means for your daughter. She's going to be getting some fantastic new boxing gloves, it sounds like. But what does this mean for brands? How should they be thinking about this?
Okay, so brands, pardon me, brands need to not be like putting this in the to-do later drawer. Because what's going to happen is if you look at information theory and information science, Google's relatively new in the whole scheme of things. So if you look at the Yellow Pages, I think was published in like early 1900s or late 1800s, their first publication. They didn't publish their last physical Yellow Pages until 2019. That's a huge amount of history. And then you look at what happened after that. Yahoo came along and you had all the Ask Jeeves and Ask.com. And it wasn't until about 2000 that Google was part of Yahoo's search engine. That's what they added onto the front page. It was when Google took off and started getting thousands upon thousands of actually direct searches that Yahoo got rid of Google, and then Google went on its own and became its own entity. So you're really talking 25 years of dominance. And that's not much in the grand scheme of things. So what brands can't do, and that change, by the way, between Yahoo and Google happened really quickly. And I think you're going to see a similar change happen now in terms of this is going to all of a sudden happen, that everyone's going to go and start using AI rather than traditional search engines. The race is whether you should, as a brand, whether the focus is going to be on ChatGPT or Google. And I don't think you need that focus, because largely this is a brand decision that you focus on your own brand, your own website, your own off-page strategies, and that will maximize your possible visibility in whatever becomes the dominant. But make no mistake, for brands, this is, for those who are old enough on the call, this is the VHS and Betamax battle, or for those that are perhaps a little younger, this is the Blockbusters versus Netflix battle of this era. And Google has, whilst it's as big as it is and as powerful, and we can't think that Google could be taken over, the OpenAI does not use paid search. And because that does not use paid search and it has huge investments, it doesn't need to worry about factoring in paid search for investor return at the moment. And that makes their model probably better. And I think that's the danger for Google. So for me, brands, they need to just invest in GEO and start looking at this, even if they're just looking on a relation of what the impact this could be. If all of our users flood to ChatGPT, they need to be thinking of what potential damage that will do, especially if they're a paid search focused brand. The worst impacted brands in this huge shift coming forwards are those who are spending a fortune on paid search. And because we know the last couple of years and the cost of living crisis, the global challenges, has forced brands to abandon brand marketing, publicity, and SEO and invest heavily in paid search, there are many brands who are over leveraged. And Gary Vee, who I never thought I'd be mentioning in a webinar on SEO, came out not long ago and said that organic GEO or LLM SEO, AI SEO, whatever you want to call it, is going to be a big thing to figure out, because, and even he says, if your brand is leveraged on paid search and that's what you've been doing to acquire customers, you are in a bad place moving forward. So brands can't sleep on this.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of information there to digest, but I'm already starting to get a clearer picture of what GEO is and how it will benefit us and clients moving forward. In that respect, Jane, I think it's time to throw a question over to you on more of the PR, digital PR side of things. So, hi, welcome.
Thanks, Andy.
So how does AI determine which brands to include in its generative answers?
Good question. I think that's the question on everybody's kind of lips at the moment. And for us, it's about three things. So consistency, credibility, and relevance when it's looking for who to surface in its overviews. So within this, there are kind of more inclusions. So for instance, brand mentions in expert content plays a key role. The use of named sources, content that directly answers common queries. As Andy mentioned earlier, queries are huge, much more important than keywords for this. And the alignment between your brand and specific topics over time, which we call entity training. And that kind of speaks to the consistency of what you're saying as a brand in relation to those topics. So you've got content that directly answers those common queries, use of named sources, which adds to the credibility, and the branded mentions in expert content obviously add to that credibility too. So some of this kind of borrows from digital PR for link building, because we're already kind of creating expert kind of expert content for publications. We're already naming sources, etc. So we're already doing some of this really well, but the focus will be more on brand mentions too.
Interesting. I mean, typically around digital PR, it's about getting links this, but it sounds there that potentially unlinked brand mentions are important for AI visibility too. So why is this?
Yeah, so unlinked brand mentions are really important for AI visibility because large language models, so LLMs, they don't need hyperlinks, they don't need those blue links to recognize and surface your brand. Instead, they're looking for unlinked mentions in really authoritative content that trains AIs to associate your brand with key topics and queries, making them a critical signal, for inclusion in AI overviews and generative search results. So these brand mentions are so important, and they were cited as like the top kind of thing to focus on, along with branded anchors and branded search volume as key factors that correlate with brands appearing in AI overviews. And this was based on research by Ahrefs.
Interesting. So I just borrow quite a lot from, you know, the typical digital PR playbook, but with extras and more stuff to learn, of course, always more stuff to learn. In terms of that, obviously, we need to be proving that these things are working or they're having an impact. So how is AI changing how we measure digital PR in general?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So AI search is changing dramatically how we measure digital PR success, because we can't rely on the metrics that we were using for digital PR for link building, for example, because link quantities, link volumes, etc., they don't count towards this because links aren't as fundamental as, say, brand mentions are. So there's no point, you know, focusing on a link quantity or domain authority, rankings or backlinks for this purpose. So measurement will now be around whether your brand actually appears in AI overviews, increases in branded search volume, and really consistent mentions across trusted sources within the media, regardless of whether there's a clickable link. So this focus on building links that we have in digital PR for trad search doesn't translate well to this activity for AI search, because brand mentions is so much more important. So it's kind of swapping those metrics out, really.
Interesting. And Andy, is this kind of what you're seeing in the technical aspect of it as well as things change? Are you seeing more emphasis onto these unbranded links too?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm going to sort of preach to the converted on this call for a second. As we've all been saying for the last few, in fact, I think I wrote an article in 2024, I think it was, it said brand mentions are the new backlinks, and that's been around for a while. The PR community has been well ahead of this curve by talking about brand mentions. The SEO community, unfortunately, has been hammering home the need for follow links. And, you know, I want follow links, and I want cost per link and things like that. And this attitude's got to change. So if you actually investigate the actual what's behind Google, PageRank, which is the link element of rankings, is only part of the ranking information. They've been looking at mention information for many, many years now. And that's brand information in relation to the sources of information you're talking about. That's how they understand authority. Whereas links are slightly different, as that many of the SEO tools, we use links as a scoring mechanism, but we never had an ability to measure authority, even though we all saw links as authority. That's what was gained, and that's why certain SEOs want more links. Now, I think what's happening now is, regardless of what you think about links as a do follow, no follow, or anything like that, I think this forces the equations. It forces the same thing around content, around everything you talk about as a deliverable, to say that everything is about building a brand. And building a brand just isn't about links with an LLM model. It doesn't even use links in the same way because it doesn't measure authority. It's looking in their databases for what they call vector embeddings. And the way it kind of works is that the LLMs, break down the text of a page and they chunk the information. I mean, first of all, they get rid of all the stop information, all the fluff, and they then look at the actual stuff that's in there and they understand what it's about. Now, they then use these little chunks of information. They break it up into like tokens, little sections into about 300 words, 100 words, 100-word tokens, and they break it up and they place this into a multi-dimensional space. Now, for those who are struggling to understand what it looks like, you can go and use a tool called TensorFlow, which is part of Google, and you can go and use their embeddings projector, and you can go and see that and see what this looks like. And it basically looks like a universe, and that's just words. Now you think about topics, information in these embedding clusters. They exist in this, how should I describe this universe. It looks like a galaxy. It looks like the universe. And that's what's happening with LLMs and PR. It's looking at the pages where they're mentioned. It's breaking these things into embedding clusters and looking for brands related to sources of information to understand authority and expertise and relevance to user queries. So Jane's entirely right, though. You know, this is all about training your brand, your entity, which is what it is. It's training the LLMs and search engines, because they still use vector embeddings as part of their algorithms. It's training them to understand what your brand is about, and that's like the science behind it. But realistically now, this is going to change how marketing managers need to understand and structure their budgets, because one of the things that they kind of like, we can't know, there's always known information and unknown information. You know, we've largely known if you do X, you have increased likelihood of rankings in search engines. With LLMs, we don't understand the time it takes. We don't understand the data training. They are largely black boxes that we don't see and understand. However, what we do know, and this is the truth, is we do know that what they're citing in their responses, we can see those responses and we can understand where those sources of information come from, and we understand what a brand is and how it works. So right now, for marketing managers, they're going to look at their budget and they're needing to actually put the accelerator on this, and they need to say, listen, I want a lot of PR activity in relation to our brands, and we need to invest heavily in this, because that's going to be the dictation over the next 2 years. The brands that don't do that and aren't listed and aren't visible are the ones who are going to be suddenly face this panda-like extinction. And if we go back all the years to panda and penguin updates that Google had, you know, and I know a lot of brands who went through that, and I was there at the time, and what happens is, you know, one day they came in and found a ton of traffic coming to their website. The next day it wasn't there. And this is what's going to happen when suddenly thousands upon thousands of people go to LLMs. Now, my gut is, Andy, this is slightly off topic, but my gut is that OpenAI or another LLM, because they're all in LLM arms races at the moment to come out with the best tools. If OpenAI or Gemini or ChatGPT, one of those will release a game-changing feature that the world talks about. And now that's actually what happened with ChatGPT's growth. They grew through natural publicity. You know, they'd already been invested in for a couple of years by Microsoft, and they grew through publicity. And that's an indication of what you should be doing as well. But they will have a product release that I believe pivotally changes the world. And at that point, the world will flood to OpenAI. If Gemini do it, they'll flood. If Claude do it, everyone will flood to there. It will be the one that releases the life-changing approach. Some people talk about this as general intelligence, artificial general intelligence, or AGI, but this is the battle we're in. So, but brands, you cannot sit on this. Every brand should be thinking about their publicity and their PR, as well as their GEO stroke SEO. And then now it's time to start figuring out budgets and start thinking about this as almost emergency footing. Google had a code red meeting when OpenAI went through the roof and suddenly exploded in users. Brands should be having their own code red meeting right now.
And I think, just to add to that, I think, you know, many are, especially in the US, because we've had conversations with brands over the last few weeks who are who are desperate because, I spoke to one kind of law firm in the US and they'd lost half of their traffic, so half of their inquiries basically overnight due to AI mode, and they couldn't understand why they weren't consistently being featured in AI search and LLMs, and they were just having a panic because they had one kind of core service and kind of keyword that generated 80% of their business, and then overnight half of that kind of traffic and those inquiries just went. So they were like, what can we do? What can we do now? How do we surface in AI overviews now? What do we need to do to our site? They were having a panic, and they won't be the only ones experiencing that. So I think, for any brands in the UK, this is your opportunity to kind of prepare for that, know what's coming, and be in a much better position than a lot of US brands are at the moment. But on the flip side of that, I know Andy's had conversations with brands that are, definitely prospering from AI search because they're gaining traffic from AI search. It's buyer intent traffic as well. So, they're converting as well off the back of that.
Yeah, brilliant, interesting. Thanks, guys. That's interesting knowledge there. Talking of knowledge, I mean, the brands that are coming to us with the questions, I mean, what are the most important AI first PR metrics to track that we're sort of advising them on?
Yeah, good question. So we've been doing a lot of work on this internally, and the most important AI first PR metrics that we think should be tracked are firstly branded search volume. So are you seeing a rise in your growth? Well, are you seeing your brand visibility growing? So that's one of the key metrics. So is entity association. So is your brand repeatedly mentioned near target keywords and queries? So this is something that you really need to focus hard on. Also, your presence in AI overviews. This can be manually tracked, which obviously takes time, or via third-party tools. So we're doing a mix of both of these things at the moment, and I'm sure there'll be some questions about tools that come up. And also authoritativeness of mentions. So are you featured in expert-led, really high trust sources? So that's the key. So again, some of this kind of borrows from traditional search in terms of expert credibility and things, but the tracking is very different for this, and there's much more focus on obviously branded search volume.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like that's the focus from what's coming out in this conversation so far. So how can PR influence visibility in the AI generated answers, and what can we do to improve our searchability there?
Good question. So one of the things that you can do is obviously kind of make sure you are targeting publications that have kind of AI deals. That's one of the ways you're more likely to show up. It's also to structure your PR for AI search overviews and LLMs. And that kind of involves making sure that you're answering those questions or queries in the first paragraph of your content as well. So it's right at the top, it's very concise, and it specifically answers those queries. So there's some simple things you can do, but it's very much kind of looking at what does the brand do? What are the typical kind of queries customers might have about your brand and products, and making sure kind of the topics you're kind of doing, obviously covering on your on-site, but also off-page, kind of focus on these things too. And Andy might have some bits to kind of add to that in terms of how you can really optimize it.
Yeah, that's a thank you, Jane. That's a very complicated answer. I have to say, I have to give for that. But basically, yeah. Okay, so and hi Naomi, by the way. Naomi is a friend of mine. I can see her in the chat, and congratulations on the new role. So basically, yeah, you're exactly right in what you're saying in terms of LLMs leverage conversation, and there's a danger that we overcomplicate everything in relation to LLMs. But LLMs have been trained on natural language. So that's what they've been trained on. They've been trained on thousands of millions of data points on content that was already created. And the thing with journalism is that most journalists are incredible writers, have been trained to very high standards, and a large amount of journalism is what is trained the LLMs. We know that because of all the outrage that's going on the training data and people blocking LLMs and things like that. So in actual fact, is really good writing does carry through to LLMs. But also you've got to think about how journalists are trained in a very specific way. They don't bury the lead, for example. That was one. And lead spelled LEDA for those trying to research that. And they have the inverted pyramid model where they're trying to keep their information at the top and that first paragraph. In contrast, SEO has done the opposite. So in contrast, SEO went down a model of word count for the last 10 years. It's about how many words you can put in. And this became a dominant way to train writers. It's about how many words. And you were almost like KPI'd on the words that you could create. So you've got two clashing models there of which why SEOs, if you're a writer in SEO, you're going to suddenly become more free and not constrained by these horrible word counts and these really wordy, fluffy intros that nobody wants to read and everyone scrapes down. So it's going to need a new look of content from the SEO side to understand it. But from a digital PR side, from the journalist side, a lot of what they do already is really good for SEO, which makes digital PR such an easy thing to say yes to for a brand. Now, the problem with digital PR, and I'll be honest with you, I'm an SEO. It's digital PR. It's challenging because you have gatekeepers, and those gatekeepers are the journalists. So the quality of your PR has to be really good. And this is something that people don't understand a little bit, because SEOs over the last few years, rightly or wrongly for their own needs, have ground down digital PR into this cost per link metric rather than placement viewed metric. And for a large part of that's killed a lot of creativity in digital PR, because the idea is you miss small. So you aim small and you miss small. Whereas digital PR and big data pieces and data things and data queries, the things that digital PR became famous for, largely went out of the window in the last 2 years. And most people wanted these, I just want links from digital PR. What people need to probably go back to again is these larger things that came out that get more and more brand mentions, more and more links. And I don't know if we can mention it, but we had tremendous success with a language platform with some of our campaigns that went viral on social media and got mentioned all across the web and on TV and so forth. So from a digital PR perspective and an SEO perspective, we need to start thinking about how we can leverage the most mentions. And almost from an SEO, if you're an SEO and you're given the role of GEO, or you're a brand marketer looking for agencies, we need to be thinking about more larger scale impact and volume. And you've got to have within your almost metrics, you've got to have this ability and this understanding that failure might happen when you go big. And that's not to say that every campaign's a success, because we aren't the judges. That's the journalists. But what you've got to do as a brand is create great PR from now on. And that's the goal, to create really good standards of PR, because the journalists know what's at stake here. And also the journalists have their own battles going on with LLM platforms. So we're going to see a whole dynamic. SimilarWeb are spearheading a campaign to stop LLMs crawling news sites and so forth. So there's a lot of internal battles. You've got news sites equally and content sites wanting engagement and relationships with AI platforms so they can make money and so forth. So there's a huge messy thing at the moment. The only thing brands can do is invest in really good publicity with really good agencies that can drive that for them. But understand, the output still has to be the quantity of placements and mentions on the web, because you can have a fantastic campaign that gets on the internet with all the marketers and everyone talks about it, but it doesn't feature very much. It doesn't go viral. It doesn't get mentioned on the web and other websites and so forth. People talking about it in LinkedIn doesn't equal necessarily the results you want online. So it is complex, but all avenues point to great PR. And if you're investing in great PR, you won't go wrong.
And I think, sorry, Andy, just to add to what Andy Hollander said, I think I think people might be wondering whether the digital PR they've been doing already is useful for obviously LLMs and AI overviews. And if you've been focused on placements rather than purely on links, then that activity should be very useful for obviously visibility in AI search. So it's, money spent on digital PR in the past, I don't think is wasted, because you've been building your brand visibility, you've been building credibility, if you've been doing kind of expert-led commentary, etc. All these things will go towards being featured in AI overviews and LLMs. I think we're just at a place now where some of the kind of tactics have changed, because we now want to focus on, being featured in AI overviews as well. So it's kind of doing the digital PR for trad search and also the digital PR for AI search. There is some crossover, but obviously, like we've mentioned today, some of the specific tactics are and obviously how we kind of monitor and track performance are very different for AI search. So I think that's the kind of the benefit and the positive to some of what Andy said today. So if you've been doing digital PR well already, then I think that's a good grounding for this.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that the focus on quality content, quality digital PR, it's still there, and we're not moving back into those darker days of being able to kind of manipulate or push ourselves up unorganically. Of course, if you are after quality digital PR and SEO campaigns, hit us up at jbh.co.uk. Final question, Jane, Andy, for now, and then we'll go over to the chat. But what mistakes do brands make, other than not using JBH for their digital PR? What mistakes do brands make when trying to measure AI-related PR success?
Good question. So I think the mistakes would be using the same set of metrics for traditional search that you'd use for AI search. So for example, over relying on a link count or domain authority as proof of success won't be a decent kind of measurement for this, because it doesn't have much correlation at all in terms of links for whether you're visible or not. Also, if you ignore branded search trends and entity mentions, that's a huge mistake, because it's a big part of the puzzle as to how you're doing in AI search. Failing to track appearances in AI generated responses. And this is something that we're doing manually and with tools as well. And then also not updating reporting frameworks to reflect the zero-click visibility. So there's no point just kind of linking the activity with conversions in the same way like we might do with traditional search and say, X number of links built equals X rankings equals X conversions. It's not going to work in the same way. So it's kind of changing that framework and really thinking about why you're looking at the metrics, what value it's going to give you, and how you're going to report back on that to others in the business too.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for the answers there, guys. I think that's enough from me. So we're going to move over to the questions from the chat. So thanks, guys, for dropping your questions in. So the top voted question, so the one that everyone wants to know is, just to manage expectations in the chat, there might be some questions here that we don't know the full answers to yet, but we'll try to endeavour to answer them as much as possible. So this question comes from Charlotte. What tools are you using to track and measure how and when brands are showing up in AI search?
Good question. And I knew this was going to be one of the biggest questions that came up. And there isn't a simple answer to this. And we're using a variety of tools, plus we're still doing manual searches to see if our clients are being surfaced in AI search. So there isn't one tool that does everything. I think a lot of these tools are still kind of in beta. They're still being tweaked. For instance, we've looked very closely at Ahrefs and what that's giving you. And it seems quite random at the moment. So I'm not really sure how helpful that is. I know there's some Chrome add-ons, etc., that we're using. Rebecca's more best placed to kind of tell you more in detail what she's using for reporting. So I'll get her to do a post kind of when she's back in on kind of what we're using and why. But I know Andy's been looking closely at measurement tools as well.
Yeah, I mean, just don't want the people on the chat understand how they work is probably a key thing. So all these tools are doing right now is creating prompts based on the websites that you're asking it to monitor. And the bigger tools obviously have to create more prompts for different websites and different brands. Some you enter your brand details and websites first, and then it goes off and creates prompts and so forth. And then it looks to see if you're in that prompt using an API system that just basically uses OpenAI or another platform to find all these prompts. So they aren't actually the thing that people are using, and you don't have that data. That's still private. And there's currently a court case going on between one of the big publishers and OpenAI, and I forget which one, in relation to they want to know what the queries are that are mentioning of being their feature, their content's being cited in. So we don't have the information about the types of prompts. So this is a little bit like guesswork. So manually is still a great way to see things, and understanding your consumers and the kind of things you want to be returned in is still a fantastic way to look at this right now. So there are tools we're monitoring. I'm getting emails constantly about check our tool, and we're going to be in that sort of framework and workflow for quite some time. What I would say about this is the larger tools, even though they have the most money to invest in this, are also in the worst place because they have to create a tool for everybody.
Yeah.
Whereas smaller startups now can start to create tools for certain groups of people and individuals. So it's going to be interesting how that works, because when you've got a massive customer base, you have to think about a massive tool, whereas some of the smaller startups think about just a single couple of customers and they can refine things. So it's going to be an interesting space. There isn't an easy answer, like Jane says, and you're just going to have to use that. But manually looking yourself is always a good way to do it, which also, by the way, brings up own channel problems, because there is no really incognito mode unless you log out of ChatGPT, because it's already got your personal data as well.
Yeah, interesting. When we know more, we'll let you guys know more through our network. So follow us on LinkedIn and for all the latest updates and news in this area. A simple question from Timmy, to the point. Should we still build follow links?
Such a good question. So I think obviously that debate in SEO, no followers, we follows links, has raged on for the last however many years. I think obviously they still hold importance for traditional search. So I wouldn't say stop building them, but I think there's a need to separate activity here between digital PR for traditional search and digital PR for AI search. Because in AI search, the focus isn't going to be on earning links. So there's no need to have that focus on, including a link and making sure the journalist follows through with that. It's more important that that brand mention is in there, that you've got the kind of topic keywords and any kind of query or relevance surrounding that in there. So the tactics are different. Follow links are still obviously valuable for traditional search, but not for AI search.
Okay, yeah. And sort of following on from that one's quite another question I think a lot of people will be asking is, does content or mentions on social media feed into AI results? Maybe Andy is probably
the
one.
I'll let Andy cover that one.
That's a deep one. Okay, so
that's a hot potato, please, mate.
Okay, so at this time, I've never seen AI ChatGPT pull out a social media results. In terms of, they can access YouTube and they might cite that, and so does other things such as Gemini. But I've never seen anything like when they pull the citations through. Most of the citations I see are from content related site, and that's increasing, by the way. I dare say that they are trying to give some love back to publishers and trying to as a bit of a PR exercise. But also bear in mind that LLMs that leverage AI, the search engines, it's a cost saver for them. So they don't have. This is why SEO will never die, because you're going to need that backbone of search engines. Otherwise, the costs are through the roof, and they're very expensive already to run. So what I would say to people is that building a brand on social media or using social media, is an entire principle. and it makes sense in lots of ways. And I've no doubt that in the future, social media and metrics and people talking about brands on social media is going to be important, and it is important. We're using social media to promote theirs. You know, there's no denying that social media plays an important part in marketing ecosphere. What I would say is there is known information and unknown information, and we currently do not know. It's unknown as to the impact on social media in relation to large language models performance. What I would say is that AI is coming to those platforms and is in them now. As a result, they are probably going to have their own models which matter as well. So what I would say is social media is social media. I think there are loads of benefits for a brand being visible in there, but I wouldn't obsess with social media if your focus is on LLMs. But what I would say is the social media teams need to start getting their head around this as well. They need to get their head around AI because it's coming for those platforms too.
Fantastic. We're drawing towards the end of the webinar, but we have quite a few questions here, so we're trying to fly through these as quickly as we can. So following on from that one is it time to phase out traditional link building strategies like guest posts and infographics and resource pages and move more to doing brand mentioned kind of focus stuff?
Go for it, Andy.
That's a deep one. So I actually think this is going to be the split. So this is my viewpoint on this: is digital PR is not the right approach for all brands, because what you're basically doing is you're making it very hard. Now, publicity for any brand can be done. You know, that's the thing. So you're talking about digital PR with a focus of gaining LLM mentions and things like, or mentions that increase visibility in LLMs. That's a particular science. Publicity as a whole, you know, a brand who works as an engineering company in the middle of Birmingham producing little bolts and nuts is going to be a hot brand to get featured on the, Reach PLC and so forth. You know, it's going to be a challenge for that. But there are ways that a brand like that can do publicity for itself and get itself mentioned. And there are micro publicity opportunities. And that's a very different subject. So publicity has been around since it's been around forever. And I don't think publicity is going to go away. And equally, when it comes to SEO and mentions in large language models, there are ways for those brands to be featured and mentioned using mutual information, which goes back to SEO tactics that aren't digital PR. So we can replicate digital PR for brands that can't do it within SEO. And I'm not going to go too deep on how you do that. And there's ways to do that. And it all involves around this mutual information. If people want to know, contact me and I'll talk about it. But yeah, you've got to think of digital PR as the creme de la creme. It's the top of the top. It's the best of the best. And digital PR for difficult industries, there'll be some which is near on impossible to do digital PR for. There'll be some that it is possible, but it takes a lot of effort. But that effort gives that reward, and that reward is very powerful because other brands do it. And it comes down to that mutual thing, that if every brand's got the same levels of mutual information, then the effectiveness of it reduces because you increase the levels of ambiguity. The more one tactic works for everybody, the more ambiguity it increases, and the systems will look for another form of mutual information. So in every sector, there are forms of mutual information, and not all of them have to be digital PR. But if you want the best source of mutual information, it's going to be digital PR.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Andy. A few more questions here. Should we start including AI-related metrics in our KPIs and goals? I noticed Ahrefs, Google Search Console, Google Analytics has already added an AI overviews metric. What do you think about that?
Yes, like why wouldn't you? Is kind of the obvious answer for us.
It's there
yes,
to do. Yeah.
Considering the impact that AI search and LLMs could have on your business, on your traffic, inquiries, everything, then I'd say it's more important than ever that you have a strategy for AI search or GEO, whatever you'd like to call it in this respect, and that strategy includes how you're going to monitor and report what does success look like and how are you going to monitor and report on that. Because if there's no strategy for it, there's not so much point monitoring it and tracking it, if that makes sense, because they both feed into each other. So yes, 100% you should be reporting on it.
Just with one caveat on that, sorry, Andy, to interrupt, is that these tools are still in their infancy.
Yeah.
So what brands can't do is use these tools as a stick to beat agencies with. And because those tools themselves are highly inaccurate. And because of that, they're good because they're giving you information. And some of that information will be only a tiny, tiny bit of the actual picture. And that's another thing to think about with budgets, because what you're talking about is it's not plug and play analytics with these LLMs, that you want more advanced metrics that might require more budget to go and get your reporting right. So we're in a bit of a Wild West territory. So yeah, include them, but understand that they might not be accurate. They might not be presenting the most accurate picture. And if you're doing it manually, it's going to take more time and so on. And there's things you can do, AI processing and set up, but all that takes effort and time. So I think brands right now probably, and agencies will love to hear that, but I think brands probably need to be a little more understanding of the situation agencies are in, and the relationship between agencies and brands need to be more collaborative and understanding. We certainly don't have all the answers. We have many and some answers, but brands certainly don't have all the answers, and they need support. So what we're doing is largely brands can lean on agencies to go and do all this research for them and give them the best information and solutions they can. But equally, you're going to need budget and understanding, and we're all going to need time to figure this out.
I think that's a very good point, in that, yes, we want to be able to report and measure this, but it's going to be quite inconsistent to start with, not like the consistency you might see reporting on traditional search in terms of keywords and rankings, etc. But also agencies are testing and learning. So we're doing our best to do it as quickly as possible. And at JBH, we're really lucky that we've got Andy, and Andy's just, as far as I'm concerned, he's the GEO or AIO king, and he's been interested in this for, years now. And so I feel like we're in a good position because of his knowledge, and because we've been looking at this really closely. We've been testing things out internally ourselves, how we as an agency show up in AI search and LLMs, what we've learned from the last 6 months of putting things in place for JBH. So we're translating this into services, but still we'll be tweaking these as we go. I think it's important to remember we've had a good, as an agency, we've had a good 12, coming up to 12 years of delivering link building and digital PR. And we've been tweaking that as we go, and reporting has changed kind of really quite heavily since we first started. So this is going to be a changing landscape as well. So I think brands need to remember that we're learning, we're doing our best to put as much kind of knowledge out there. And like we're doing today, as much knowledge sharing as possible. But we need that cooperation with brands, that we kind of test and learn together, rather than we have all the answers right now, because that wouldn't be correct.
Yeah, brilliant. And if you do want to speak to the GEO King, of course, you can find him on LinkedIn, Andrew Collins, hit him up, and with all your questions, GEO stuff related. While we're in the education kind of area here, a question from Naomi says, how are you working with internal PR teams to help them understand the significance of this change? Very good question.
Sorry, can you ask me that again? I was reading another question.
How are you working with internal PR teams to help them understand the significance of this change, or maybe working with internal marketing teams at brands, etc.?
Yeah, so these are conversations that we're having right now. So that as well is in its infancy. Some brands haven't even started to acknowledge that they need to be having this conversation, even though we're saying, look, there's, we need to plan and prepare for this, and also there's an opportunity for smaller brands to get some leverage here as well. So we are having those conversations. We're also kind of adapting, some of our current activity for it, but it's definitely kind of in its infancy. But the conversations that we're having externally with more American brands are the ones that are being hit by AI mode, and they're seeing the direct impact of that. Whereas a lot of our clients, are sitting in the UK and Europe and haven't had that impact as much yet. So I think there's different conversations being had based on geography, things like that.
Fantastic. I know we've gone over time slightly here. We've got a few more questions, but there's still plenty of people still listening. So we'll endeavour to get these done as quickly as possible, guys. Andy, does SEO help with GEO? Very general question there.
Yes, yes, yes,
Next
it does.
question.
It does. So I think the data is looking about and this is the kind of crazy thing, right? Because everyone assumes it's just page one with SEO, and it does. It's page one. We know that very few people go beyond page one when you're looking in trad search for answers, and still trad search is used by the vast majority of people on the planet. And but realistically, what we are also seeing is a bit of a shift, and it's crazy that we might be thinking about 20% of conversions might happen through AI search because people understand or take action in AI search. Maybe that's happening. It might be sector more generally specific. It might be more people who work in professional services who are using ChatGPT or using it more, and so on and so forth. So there's all different types of things happening around this. So yes, but SEO will help with that because the data shows is about 30%. If you're ranked on page one, you have just under a 30% likelihood that you'll be referenced in an LLM result. So that people might say, well, that's 70% chance you won't. And the reason why that is because LLMs can converse the web far faster and check the first 3 pages of Google or Bing or whatever for multiple different search terms, which actually makes it quite better because, if I'm honest with you, Bing isn't as good as a search engine as Google. So you need that extra expanse of the first 3 pages to ensure you show up. What shows up on page one for queries in Bing isn't necessarily the same thing as shows up in Google for page one and so forth. And Google became the dominant search engine. So yes, SEO is important because you want to be ranking still for your key terms, but also still most commerce is done on search engines for now. So that's still massively important. The GEO side is more related to capturing people who are using those LLMs. And I've always said this there's an ROI issue in paid search. Some people click on paid search ads. Lots of people click on organic. Most people do. Almost everybody clicks on organic results. Right now, some people are clicking on answers in LLMs, and there's no way to access them other than generative engine optimization. Some SEO carries through to those platforms. It really does. And so it matters. It's important. But you can have a great presence in SEO and have a terrible presence in LLMs. And you can also have a great presence in LLMs, but maybe a terrible presence in search engine optimization, trad search. As a brand, you want to increase the likelihood that you're being visible for core queries, terms, relationships for your products and services in both, because that's how you maximize revenue opportunity and you increase your brand sales and your business sales and your products, service inquiries, and so forth. And this, again, makes it a little bit iffy for people who are just leveraged on paid search. If that's your main thing, paid search, there are 2 channels now in relation to search where people are using more and more and more. So it's worth considering your budgets and maybe even getting more budget. But yeah, SEO does help.
Fantastic. And I'll try to squeeze one more question in here. This one kind of follows on from that a little bit. So how soon do you think we can expect to get results from digital PR activity? Have you noticed direct and quick impact on LLM's responses from your campaigns? I know we've seen some impact on some campaigns that we've done. So I guess it's a timing question now. How quickly? I mean, you were talking then just about pre-existing content, pre-existing, products, etc., that's already being translated into the LLMs. But what about from new activity? How quickly is this work, and how quickly is it coming through?
Do you want me to answer that, Jane?
Yeah, you're welcome to answer it, and then I can add to it.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, yeah. How long's a piece of string? That's the answer to that, because LLM data. The full question from Christina's in this chat is really interested about training data. She is right. 80% of ChatGPT responses are trained from data from 2023. I think November or December 23. But that's not to say that they aren't actually adding more data and it uses more data and inquire. We actually don't know, but we do know that it's adding more data in different rounds, but not these full LLM visibilities. And I think largely, if you go and look at data science, what they're trying to do is increase the speed of which the training data is absorbed by LLMs. And that's part of AI search. But you also have to remember, right, that AI is not just what we see. It's a massive industry that's going to impact everything from health to lifestyle to pet care. It's embedded in products deeply within systems already, spotting cancers within treatments of the hospital and so forth. Cars are embedded with AI to help them be driverless. So we've got massive sectors. So what I would say to people is yes, we don't know precisely, which is even more the reason to start now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One last question to see us out. What's the most important thing a brand can do to be featured as often as possible in search overviews and LLMs? I know we've talked about the branded focus before. Jane?
Yeah, I think this is a simple one, and it just comes down to being out there as much as possible. Not out there for any old reason. So there's no point just sticking any content on there. Like there's no point putting out brain teasers and, you know, some of the old school tactics that you see some of the gaming brands do, for example. But it's about really good quality digital PR focused for AI search, and just as much activity as possible to build the brand, build awareness, and make sure you've got as many opportunities as possible to be featured in AI overviews. And then just to add to that, you've got kind of to think about how the brand is placed in relation to those longer queries that are going to be, you know, answered in AI overviews. So kind of putting those two things together. But basically it's being out there as much as possible, which is kind of old school, kind of building brands and kind of PR.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you very much. It's about an hour of being peppered with questions there of GEO and AI stuff. So I'm sure you had to spin in. Appreciate the questions from the chat. Thank you ever so much for getting involved. I hope we managed to answer all of your questions as much as possible. If we didn't, please find us on social medias, website, reach out to either Jane or Andy and they will endeavour to answer some more questions. So I'll pass it over to Jane now. She's just got a couple of elements just to sort of guide you in the right way of the next steps following on from this webinar. So from me, it's a goodbye and thank you for joining us today.
So yeah, just before you go, this afternoon, we will be sending you the 2 checklists. So we've got one SEO or GEO checklist, and we've got one digital PR checklist to help you plan and prepare for AI search and LLMs. So those will be coming your way this afternoon via email. And also we are launching our suite of AI services very soon. So please kind of stay tuned for those brands. And also, I want to say, if anyone does want to chat to myself or Andy about any challenges they're currently having with AI search or worried about anything, you know, that might be on its way, then please drop either of us a message on LinkedIn. We'd both be happy to chat to you. And lastly, what was I going to cover? Lastly, Andy's latest newsletter, all about what is GEO, is like essential reading. So I will also share a link to that with you. You need to grab a cup of coffee or tea or glass of wine, because it's a 20 to half a minute read, you know, if you're as slow as me, just to kind of really understand all that kind of quite complex information. But I think it's essential reading. It's just part 1, so there's a few more parts to come. But I think it's very obviously critical for this conversation and really useful knowledge for everybody to have. So I hope that's been useful. I hope I've done Rebecca justice today. And yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts, or would like to kind of share your thoughts on the webinar and whether you enjoyed it today, we'd love to hear those. So
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Andrew.
See you later.
Take care, everyone, and have a good afternoon. Goodbye.